At this time, I'd like to call the Wilmington Board of Selectmen meeting of Monday, November 28, 2016 to order. All members of this board are present. At this time, I'd kindly ask that we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the transmitting of the Treasury warrants 21, 21A, 22, 22A. And typically I do questions, comments, or a motion. I wanted to start with some introductory comments, myself as the chair, and certainly open it up to fellow board members. What I'd like to do is put a motion on the floor, and a second for discussion, and then I'd like to make a couple comments and then invite anyone else that might have any comments as well. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second for discussion?
Second.
Seconded.
Second for discussion.
Okay.
Madam Chair, relative to 22A, I'm going to abstain from that vote.
Okay.
Evidently, that's where the former superintendent is being paid, and this will be just for this time.
Okay. So I wanted to, as I indicated, to make some comments. I know some fellow board members had some questions, some concerns. I know that some people have received some constituent inquiries, and I know the media has spoken about it as well. I wanted to be clear that the agreement with Superintendent or former Superintendent Delay was an agreement that was made with the school committee and the former superintendent. This Board of Selectmen, once again, does not have jurisdictional right to have negotiated or agreed to whatever separation agreement is in fact in place. That being said, in terms of my vote, and people can certainly speak for themselves, I'm voting in favor of these Treasury warrants because it's my understanding that we have a financial obligation and that we're legally bounded to the agreement. That being said, I certainly understand the sentiments and concerns about people having that, the nature of the settlement based on the fact that there's a non-disclosure relative to it. There were meetings and discussions that took place in executive session that are not within our purview, and I don't want to guess and speculate what the nature of those conversations and meetings were. I'd like to think that an elected committee was doing their best to act in the best interest of the town and the students of Wilmington. Having said that, I would like to put it out there for the discussion, and I'd like to ask the manager to research the agreement, to have it looked at by our town council, and to understand very specifically what the Board of Selectmen role is in agreeing to these Treasury warrants, meaning what are our options to approve or to not approve, and what are the ramifications. Asking that is because I don't want to vote against something and put the town in a further disadvantage and essentially make a bad situation worse by opening up the town to potential legal action and future possible damages. So that being the case, I'd like to ask the manager to look into the agreement to make sure that Mike Morris has a copy of the agreement, and to also have our legal team look at the agreement in its entirety and to give us our legal options. Does anyone else have any questions, or if you want to make any comments, Jeff?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could. I did have a conversation with John Foskett about the nature of the approval process. So just to be clear, when the board considers approving the Treasury warrants, this is essentially approving them into the record. When a warrant is issued, which is, as you know, on Wednesdays, there's a payroll warrant issued and a vendor warrant issued. The town accountant and I sign off on that, and then members of the board are asked to sign off on that. Once the selectmen sign off on the warrant, that authorizes the treasurer to make payment. And in many cases, for example, on payroll, there is people who have direct deposit, the money is transferred into their respective accounts. Vendor, in the case of vendor warrant bills are paid and checks are issued on Friday. So it is at that point, in signing the warrant, that authorizes the treasurer to issue payment. So in terms of the, if the board in the majority was to decide not to sign one of the warrants, in this case, a warrant with compensation for Mary DeLay, her recourse would be to go to Superior Court based upon breach of contract. And depending upon the circumstances, if the court deemed the case to be frivolous, the town's failure to make payment, she could obtain attorney's fees for her filing that case, and there could be 12% interest for the duration of the unpaid compensation. So those are the consequences if the payment was not able to be made.
Okay. And then in addition, could it be confirmed that if there were any provisions, because, I understand the non-disclosure and that it's technically in the school committee's purview, but the fact that we are approving treasury warrants puts us at somewhat of a disadvantage because we can't see the contents of that agreement. So do we know, or could we find out if there are any term provisions that if Ms. DeLay were to have gainful employment between now and the conclusion of her payment structure, is there any sort of option to not have to pay her that you're aware of?
It is my understanding there is no such option, that
Okay.
there is no provision to that effect.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Mr. McCoy?
Madam Chair, I'm agreeing with you. I mean, I don't want to see the community spend extra money where it's unwarranted. More of this is more of a protest vote. To be totally honest, I mean, I don't think we have seen a document come from the school committee to justify this expense. I would hope to think that's forthcoming, because obviously we need to justify the bills. And that's the only reason there, Madam Chair. I do like to bring up something, but I'll bring it up under new business because I understand we have a full agenda ahead of us. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Briefly, and I think it's maybe repetitious, and I apologize if it is. My concern about this issue is that we are not engaging in negotiations or a part of the contract that ultimately gets signed, whether it be with the former superintendent or any future superintendent. So the agreement and the nature of that contract, we have no oversight for. However, we at the, I guess the top of the org chart for the town are the ones that approve these expenditures. So, Jeff, to your point when you were saying a few moments ago, we all ultimately authorize, or I forget the terminology you use, but we're ultimately authorizing the treasurer to move the monies into the respective locations, whether that be in the form of a check or a direct deposit or otherwise. If I have no objection to doing that, even if I don't know how much an individual makes, say at the fire station, or any number of the different departments, employees or department heads. The fact is that under your direction, we have some oversight of that. So I feel comfortable that that individual is being compensated at the right rate, and I feel comfortable that the contract, if they're a contracted employee, that they were a part of a contract that we had deliberation on and agreed to. And even if they're not a contracted employee, there's still someone that, under your direction, as the CEO of the town, as it were, that you're answering to us, and that we're authorizing that expenditure. It's this school committee expenditure component that I never really thought about. It's never risen to the level of my consciousness until this time. So I'm anxious to. I agree. I'm going to vote to approve the warrant. And I will continue to, but I'm anxious to get some clarity either from council or, however this rolls out, as to what authority we have and what, where the lines are as to these contracts that we don't have we don't have a seat at the table. Ought we have a representative from this board a part of those contract negotiations? It's just a thought that I throw out there, just so that we have a little more teeth in the approving of the warrants. So I don't have a question in as much as it's just my observation that I think if we're going to be approving warrant payments for unnegotiated or contracts that we didn't have a seat at the negotiation for, there needs to be some more clarity, and I don't know how we get there.
Just to be clear, in many respects, the school committee operates as a separate and distinct body. So, for example, when the contract for busing is established, they go through a bid process, and ultimately a decision is made to enter into a contract with a vendor. That is a decision that ultimately is made by the school superintendent, and as a legal matter, the Board of Selectmen does not have the ability to keep that from happening. So there's any number of contracts that, you know, the teacher's contract, for example, collective bargaining agreement, and the various collective bargaining agreements that the school department enters into. I think they have 5 or 6 different groups that they negotiate with. In all of those instances, the school committee ultimately takes a vote to adopt those collective bargaining agreements, and the Board of Selectmen, you know, typically I would imagine is not necessarily familiar with the terms and conditions, but there may be elements of those contracts that the board may not be necessarily supportive of, but ultimately those are issues that are under the purview of the school committee. So this is,
Right.
you know, this is certainly an issue that has gained the spotlight of late, but it's not, in many respects, different from a lot of the different agreements that the school committee enters into.
Right. And I think it's, I was speaking for myself, I think the struggle is that, you know, because this has become, you know, as a sitting member of this board, I don't even know all of the information relative to the settlement and things of that nature. So I'm voting for something that traditionally everything else is an open record, it's transparent, it should be, you know, it's made public, and I'm not, this isn't directed at you or any member of the school committee. In this particular instance, you have an agreement that is not able to be made public. I think I'm struggling with it, and I believe a lot of tax-paying residents are struggling with the fact that they feel that they have the right to know what we're agreeing to. And I think that that's contributing to some of the concern and focus is that people don't understand exactly the exact terms and conditions of the departure, and I think they're struggling with the amount, with not knowing all that went into arriving at that decision, and did it have to be that way, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll close with that and turn it over here.
Thank you. If I could, Madam Chair, just to add my 2 cents. I, too, will be voting for this, and just so I'm clear, I don't want to put the taxpayers at any risk of possibly having to pay any more. I mean, that's why, you know, I've shared some of the frustrations. I've had questions. I've had, over the last couple of weeks, several conversations with the manager and the chair to ask questions. The bottom line is that there was an agreement made by the school committee. I don't have any control over that. And certainly, I don't want to ever put at risk any other of the hardworking town employees. I mean, their pay is grouped into this as well. And so I'm never going to vote against people who work hard to earn their income. So, I mean, part of my goal for being here is to try to save the town as much money as I can and save the taxpayer, and I don't want to put it at risk by voting against this, that the taxpayer may have to pay more. So I'll be voting for it again.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Madam Chair, that I would have to reluctantly be in favor of it because I don't want to put the taxpayer in behind the 8 ball. But I do have a problem with not having a copy of the former superintendent's contract and the settlement agreement. I do see it a little bit different, the settlement agreement from a collective bargaining agreement. When I talk to the town accountant who prepares the warrants, the payroll and the vendor warrants, and he doesn't even have a copy of the agreement so that he can even verify that what's coming over is accurate. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not accurate, but at least you'd have a check and balance. And we don't have that. because there's reluctance from the business manager at the school department to give the settlement agreement to our town accountant who prepares the warrants. I just, something that I don't understand why it's working out that way. And I think, and I still believe the school committee owes the taxpayers an explanation. I mean, if the chairman of the school committee should come in here and explain how that agreement transpired, there needs to be some transparency. And, you know, I just don't understand why the agreement is not public record, because clearly, coming from the Secretary of State's office, and I turn this over to you, Madam Chair, and number 14, from the Secretary of State's office, it clearly says that there is no disclosure agreements and that it should be public. And it's this paragraph here, if you would like to read it, or the town manager or myself, so that we should, as board members, get a copy of that agreement. And most definitely, the town accountant and the town manager should get that. I just don't understand why they're not forthcoming with that agreement. And what you said earlier, Mr. Manager, about the school committee not having a clause in that contract to say if she received another job in education, that it would be null and void, or that there would be a differential pay. I just don't understand why the school legal counsel didn't have sense enough to put that clause into the agreement. So I don't know if you want to read that, just to verify the fact that there is no disclosure agreements for local employees, local.
Okay, so
It's
you're...
that top paragraph.
The public interest in financial information of a public employee outweighs the privacy interest where the financial compensation in question is drawn on an account held by a government entity and comprised of taxpayer funds. Additionally, the disclosure of the settlement amount would assist the public in monitoring government operations. Therefore, exemption to the public record law will not operate to allow the withholding of settlement agreements as a whole. However, portions of the agreement and the related responsive records may be redacted pursuant to specific cited exemptions in the public records law. I again, based upon my conversation with John Foskett, he indicated that the financial terms within an agreement like this would be subject to public review, but other elements that are not specifically financially related could be redacted. So I think, and I can certainly have a follow-up conversation with council, that this paragraph speaks to that it references financial compensation. So I don't think there's any question that the financial terms of the agreement are subject to public scrutiny. I believe, again, based upon the conversation I had, was that other elements of the agreement are not subject to public review. But I can certainly follow up with him on that. The request or the suggestion was made to provide council with a copy of the agreement. I guess my only question would be, what would the board be looking for council to comment on? Since I believe, again, the only information he would be privy to would be whatever the financial elements of that agreement were.
In my mind, I would say that to review the contents of all documents, to give a suggestion as to what could be made public, because I believe, and I sense that other board members believe, that the public has a right to know this information, and also to revisit to make sure if there are any terms or clauses in there such that avails the town to pay or not pay, which it sounds like you've indicated that there is no clause that if the former superintendent had other employment, that there's a, for lack of a better term, an escape clause, so to speak, for payment. And then just to document also the ramifications if we were to not vote in favor of a Treasury warrant and the potential legal downside, inclusive of potential damages to the town if we were not to fulfill this obligation.
Okay.
Does that capture it for everybody?
That's fine, yes, Madam Chair, I agree. You know, Selectman Kyra just submitted something to the town manager, and if that does hold water, you know, we should send out an extension, should extend an invitation to the school committees, at least the chairperson, to come before the body to explain to us. I read the papers too, I read the Lowell Sun that their reporters contacted them several times, and nobody's ever gotten back to the reporter. So maybe we need to do, and I like to talk something under new business, Madam Chair, as I stated, but I do agree what you said earlier, that if we are obligated, I understand. And maybe what we need to do is invite the chairperson in here if that truly holds water. And I think Mr. Kyra knows what he's talking about. They have some explaining to do, plain and simple.
Is it the chair's or the board's direction that I contact the school superintendent and indicate that there's a desire to have the school chair come in, or?
I do. I want to be clear that the pulse and the tenor from my standpoint is not to be adversarial. It's seeking to understand. There's a lot of unknowns. I think this conversation has arrived to this point because there's a lot of information that just isn't made available to us as a board. And then, in addition, that cascades into the public. So this is, I believe that they did their job. They did what the best they could with the information that they had and the options that they had. But we weren't in that room, and we weren't part of those negotiations, and I feel that there's a public responsibility to share that information with a board that's also working in conjunction with you to be signing off on those payments. And then in addition, I feel that the residents of this town deserve to have public information made available. These are tax dollars that are paying the salaries of town employees, respectfully stated, and I believe that there's a public responsibility. And what I'd like to do is try and seek to bring some mutual understanding among everybody, and then also I don't think it's beneficial for the business of the town to revisit this conversation every time a Treasury warrant approval comes up every meeting, because we haven't had these effective, productive conversations just to get all of this out here, get it known, deal with it, and let's move on.
I agree with what you said. I plan on voting for the next time, just because obviously the other expenses, but we just touched upon a moment ago, which to hurt us, I was gonna bring this up under new business. I think we should extend an invitation to the chairperson to come and explain to us that expense. People wanna know.
I don't think for a minute that anybody on that school committee has any wrongdoing or was doing anything to be detrimental to the town. I don't believe that. I just think that there needs to be some collective communication so that we're in the know of how this came to be. That's my standpoint. I don't know, if anyone wants to add to that.
If I may, I want to punctuate where I am. If I'm putting ink to a piece of paper every Wednesday that says that I authorize payments out to, dozens and dozens of payees, and one of those is based on a contract that I have no knowledge of. I don't understand how the calculation is being made. I don't know how long that is going to go on. There's no visibility and no transparency to me as an elected member of this board. That's the thing that I want to get fixed. That the people of the town of Wilmington elected us in our positions and elected me to this position to keep my eye on the ball on their behalf. And this is an aspect where I can't keep my eye on the ball. So I'm being asked to sign something, and I don't know what I'm signing, and that makes me very uncomfortable. So I'm looking for clarity on that specific point. Yes, it's specific to this particular case, but it's emblematic of kind of the bigger picture, is how do we, if we're signing a piece of paper to authorize payments to be made, how do we get a full and clear representation of what is being paid out?
And can I follow up with that? And I agree with Mr. Shampoo, and to take it one step further, you have a town accountant who, I'm not speaking for him, but I'm sure is frustrated over the fact he doesn't have the agreement to make sure that what is going in there is on the agreement. And, you know, and that's why I brought that from the Secretary of State's office, so that at least our town accountant, Mike Morris, can get that paperwork from the business manager, so that we know that what we're signing is part of that agreement, that he is checking for us when we put our signature to the paper.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree, we need to move on, but, I mean, I'd be happy to make a motion. You know, they can not come. I mean, I'd like to make a motion that we invite the chairperson of the school committee to come before the Board of Selectmen and explain to us the expense.
I mean, we can do it in the form of a motion. I mean,
Unless you want to just invite him, and that's fine.
Should we take this motion up first? Because there's
Yeah.
already a
Make a
motion
motion.
on the floor.
right, exactly. So we have a motion made and seconded for the treasury warrants. We had discussion. We can just table that for right now, Michael, and come back to it. All those in favor on the treasury warrant?
I'll just vote against 22A.
Okay, thank you. Then, Michael, if you want to make a motion.
I make a motion that we invite the chairperson to come to the next selectmen's meeting to explain and justify the cost of the $13,000 per month expense.
Motion been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so moving on to the approval of minutes for June 27, 2016. Questions, comments, or motion?
So move, Madam Chair.
Okay, motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to our 7 o'clock appointment, which we are running a definite 31 minutes late, so I do apologize. It's with Karen Rashis, our principal assessor, with reference to a public hearing for the discussion of local property tax policy with reference to classification. Good evening. Karen, I apologize that we're running long.
Hopefully our hearing will be shorter.
You're talking about money too, so.
I was like, oh, no. So-
Justifying it, though.
Yeah. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I would just like to take a minute, as you had said, we're here to review and discuss the tax classification for fiscal year 17. I think the easiest thing would be is if I was able to review the packet with you that was provided earlier in the week, and feel free to ask me questions.
Sure.
So we're here this evening in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, to present information to the Board of Selectmen so that they may determine the percentages of the tax levy to be paid by each class of real and personal property for fiscal year 2017. The Selectmen must vote a residential factor, which will result in the percentage of the tax levy to be allocated and paid by the residential property owners. After careful analysis and review, the Board of Assessors recommend to the Board of Selectmen is a classification shift of 175%, which results in a minimum residential factor of 0.779155 for fiscal year 2017. This shift conforms to the guidelines of Prop 2.5, and it's consistent with prior year's tax policies. Adoption of this recommendation allows the town to assess and collect the equitable amounts of taxes from the residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. This year, a correction, was not a certification year. However, assessments must still be submitted and approved to the Department of Revenue. The proposed assessed values that we'll review were established by analyzing calendar year 2015 sales and income data. Our analysis resulted in the average single-family residential property value increasing approximately 7.6%. This reflects the increase occurring in the current residential marketplace. The average tax calculation is simply offered as a guideline. There are some taxes that increase more and some that increase less. This is just imputed by the average. So traditionally, the Board of Selectmen have shifted the maximum allowable to the commercial, industrial, and personal property class, and that is the recommendation of the Board of Assessors this evening. So if we turn to the second page, there was a chart that will review the what occurred with the property values. In the residential class, the fiscal year 2017 total value is $3,182,585,028. That's an increase of approximately 8.1% for the entire class. The average single-family home increased 7.6%. So the residential class includes apartments, condos, personal property, and as you know, we've had some growth in those areas that would raise that a little bit to the 8.1%. The commercial class, the total assessment is $157,979,269. The values in the commercial class did not decrease. The decrease on this chart of $349,000 is a result of certain parcels that transferred out of the commercial class to another class of property this year. So by no means did commercial property values decrease across the board. And the industrial value for fiscal year 17 is $667,938,057, which is a 4.74% increase. And our personal property values increased to $111,228,860, which is an 11.84% increase in personal property value. The interesting thing to note here is for fiscal year 2017, the total real and personal property value of $4.1 billion is the first time that the town of Wilmington has gone over that threshold of the $4 billion mark. We've been up against the edge of 3.8, 3.9, but even back in 2008, we were not at the 4.1 billion. So that's kind of a milestone that we have reached.
May I ask one question, if I may? And I don't know,
Sure.
I just didn't want to get you too far into the further pages.
Yeah.
When you indicated on the commercial piece with a reclassification, can you give me an example of that, please?
So there was, I was contacted by a representative of a parcel that was classified as commercial that should be classified residential, and that was the residential daycare facilities for children, not for elderly. So
Okay.
there were multiple locations in town that all had to be transferred to the residential class
Understood.
from the
Okay, that makes
commercial
sense.
class, yeah.
Thank you.
I think the pie chart kind of helps show, too, that we are predominantly a residential community. The next page, this discusses the percentage shifts by class. So this shows the amount to be raised of $76,408,118. And the current, without a shift, without any tax classification, if we had a tax rate, a single tax rate, the average, or the residential class of property would make up 77.2523% of the tax levy, and the commercial class would make up, the commercial, industrial, personal would make up the balance of 22.7477%. If you voted a shift to the 175%, then the commercial, the residential class will pay 60.1915%, and the commercial industrial class will increase to 39.8085% of the tax levy. As you note down below, that fiscal year 2016, the residential class had paid 59.19%, so they are paying a little bit more of the levy this year than they had in prior years, but that is due to the more of the value in the residential class versus the commercial, industrial, personal class.
Last year, sale prices, was it a 5% increase last year, roughly?
I do have that. Last year, the values increased, roughly, it was about a 5.3%, yeah.
So we're continuing to grow.
Continuing to grow in values, the market's
Right,
just
which is
continuing to be
outstanding.
hot, yeah.
Which is more per thousand to pay on.
Yes, yes, so we have more people to share.
Right.
The burden with.
Yes.
On the next page, this is a chart that will show the impact of what residential factor that you vote. And so if we voted not to shift any burden to the commercial class and you voted a factor of 1, the residential would pay the 77.2522%. There would be one single tax rate of $18.55 for both residential and CIP, resulting in an increase to the residential homeowner of $2,104. And meanwhile, the commercial class would see a decrease in the average value of $23,247. So if you were voting to shift 150%, the residential class would pay 65% of the tax burden, and it would result in a residential estimated tax rate of $15.82 and an estimated rate of commercial, industrial, personal of $27.82. And that would still result in a larger increase for the residential homeowner of $946. Meanwhile, the commercial average tax bill would go down by $7,333. And the chart.
If I could just jump in here
Sure.
real quickly to make a point, which I think is necessary to make. The numbers that Karen is referencing here in terms of, for example, that $2,100 increase on the residential side is strictly based upon the average home value. So as she pointed out earlier, some homes are valued more than $423,000, which is the average right now. Some homes are valued at a lesser number. So as she talks about these numbers, just bear in mind that these are based upon the average home value, which is $423,000.
Right, yep, thank you. Yeah, the average single-family value. Then as you can see, we demonstrate shifts if you went to the 160, the 170. At 170% shift, the residential class pays 61.32% of the share, and the CIP would pay 38.67, resulting in estimated tax rates of $14.72 for residential and $31.53 for CIP. The average residential tax bill would increase by $480, and the average commercial industrial by $964. If you voted the maximum allowable shift under the law of the 175, the residential factor would be 77.9155. On that, there's a little rounding issue on that chart, is 5.4, but it's 5.5. And the residential percentage share would be 60.1915%, and the CIP share would be 39.8085%, resulting in a fiscal year 17 tax rate for residential at $14.43 and commercial at $32.46. This would result in the average single-family tax bill at $366.14 increase, and the average commercial industrial at $631.91 increase. That's reflective of the average residential value going up by 1.076% and the average commercial by 1.03%.
So I think what's an interesting data point to pull out of there is that with the maximum shift, which is what we're going to be asked to vote on tonight, we're not actually voting on the tax rate, we're voting on the shift, which determines the tax rate, is that our 2016 residential, for example, is $14.63 today. If we were to vote this new classification and do the maximum shift, our actual tax rate would go down $14.45, but the reason why there's a tax bill increase is because home values went up 7% plus. So you're paying on a larger average.
Correct, a
House
larger
price.
average and a larger tax levy than
So the
prior
good news
years.
is your house is worth more, even though the tax rate is going down,
Right.
potentially, if we were to take that. So I think that's an important point to make.
Thank you. And on the next page, this here is an 18-year history of the average single-family value in tax bill in comparison to the tax levy. A few pieces I'd like to point out to you there is in fiscal year 7, in fiscal year 08, you can see that's when our values were the highest that we had seen. At the single-family average value was $401,598 and $402,698. That was kind of the peak, and that was based on calendar year like 2005, 2006 sales. And then you can see as the market started to decline for the next 5 years, values decreased accordingly. And the bottom, our values hit the lowest was in fiscal year 2013, when the average assessed value was $349,457, with an average bill increase of $413. That was based on calendar year 2011 sales. We inched up a little bit in 14, then in 15, again, a little bit of an increase, and 16 around like the 5% increase that you'd mentioned, Madam Chair. And this year, the 7.6% increase to the 423. A couple things about the average is the average home today as to what's being built is very different than the average home back in the, early 2000s. So our average homes today, whether they're tear downs or new construction, we're tearing down, $280,000 little houses, and we're replacing them with $650,000, $700,000 houses. In our new subdivisions, they're 700 plus for new construction. So our average new home that's being added to the tax roll is also higher. It's not a $400,000 ranch that's being built. So that's also playing into the impacting the average single-family home. On the next page is just a graphic view of the same numbers. I think a graph sometimes helps visualize. You can see how we've followed the economy pretty much on this chart with the increases and decreases, and also the number of sales. Back in fiscal year 2011, we only had 146 single-family sales. This year, we were upwards of 218 arm's length transactions in our sales. So the last page that I'd like to review with you gives you a history of the tax shift that the town of Wilmington has done. And if you vote the shift of the 175% with the tax levy of the $76,408, it would result in an excess levy capacity of $28,266. I would like to show in 2004, if you look, the percentage shift was 200. So back then, what was going on was residential property values were increasing more than commercial industrial values. So what was happening is the residential share was ending up being higher than the commercial industrial at an unfair pace. So legislation was passed, and they allowed people to shift to 200% instead of 175. And then written in the law was a scale to scale that down. So then it went to the 197, the 190, into the 183. But prior to that, we'd always had shifted the 175% or the maximum allowable shift. That was an exception to the rule then. So this year, the fiscal year 2017, the residential factor adopted by the board governs the percentage of the tax levy to be paid by the residential property owners. So if the board votes the residential factor of 0.779155, resulting in a shift of 175%, it would be the most favorable scenario for the residential taxpayer, and then that's the recommendation of the Board of Assessors to you this evening.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open it up to the audience at this time. It is a public hearing, so would anyone in the audience like to make a comment? Seeing none. Anyone here on the board? Questions, comments, or motion? Yes.
Yeah, just a quick thank you, Madam Chair. Just to let you know, I was back on the board in 2004. Mitt Romney was the governor. It was a special act of the legislature to do that. If not, we'd be paying a lot more money today. And I know I wore two hats, owning a business in the House. So, I mean, I think historically, we've always voted the maximum tax shift and put it basically on commercial. And I do think we get even though the taxes has gone up, even though it may have come down at a percentage-wise that we're talking here, but obviously with the house increase, you're paying more taxes. No matter how you cut the mustard, we're paying more. But I do believe that we do get a great bang for our buck in this community. We don't have user fees, bus fees, we don't have trash fees. A lot of other communities have to pay those fees above and beyond their tax rate, so they could be spending thousands, especially if they have a couple of kids in school. In comparison, thank you, Madam Chair, in comparison to other communities, what's the breakdown? For example, like in Tewksbury or communities the same size as ours, how do we sit in relative in the Merrimack Valley, relative the tax rate? Are we in the middle? I would assume. Are we a little bit less than the middle, a little bit above the middle? Where do we go?
Very good question. I did not do an analysis of specific surrounding communities. I looked at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we rank like 99th in fiscal year 16, because not everyone has their tax rates established yet for fiscal year 17. So we've kind of always hovered around 101 to 199 in that ballpark. With the last year's average rate on the statewide basis, I believe was like 5,200, 5247 was the average tax bill on a statewide basis. That's taking in Western Mass to Weston. That was based on 341 communities because 10 of them either had residential exemptions or didn't have a rate that was set to compare to. So I believe that, as you stated, that compared to other communities around us, like our values, our single-family value is typically higher. I didn't compare the exact number, but typically higher than Tewksbury, Billerica. But we're obviously typically lower than North Reading, Reading, Andover, which border us on the other side. So I think that Wilmington has kind of been a tucked away little hidden secret that now we have the land that other people don't have. We have residential subdivisions popping so that people can come here and enjoy a nice residential community or new subdivision and establish as their home, whereas a lot of the other towns don't have that amount of land to be able to do that, and it's more tear downs or smaller subdivisions. So I've seen, since I've been here since 2013, the tax rate setting in 2013, that homes and building lots back then were selling for, you know, 165, 75,000. I've got people paying for tear downs now, 260, 80,000. So values have definitely, new construction when I first got here was, you know, mid to high fives is now 7 to 750. And that's in a very short, that's in a 4-year period that we're just on the upswing right now. And I can't compare exact numbers, but I think that our average assessment is in line with our, you know, surrounding neighbors, but I do think we offer a lot of services without paying fees.
Yeah, and I think that's the bottom line without paying those additional fees. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I would just say thank you very much for your presentation. Your analysis is spot on. Every single thing that you said is absolutely true. From a professional standpoint, I look at some of this information, so we're probably in the middle. Depends city, town, fluctuates, and then obviously some of the other communities like Woburn, for example, has a lot more density. It's a city. They're probably in the $10, $11 range. Everyone else around us is right proportional to where we are. And Reading is the only community that abuts us. They have one single tax rate. They don't have it broken out. So I think in terms of performance, construction is up, building is up. You know, I think Wilmington overall is doing very well in the housing market. The average selling price is exactly what you said, and inventory is relatively low. People are moving here and they're staying. Yeah. And if they are making moves, they're usually selling and trading up and moving to another section of town. So they're not necessarily leaving Wilmington, which is a good thing. So, anything else?
I think it bears saying that this is an opportunity for us to take advantage of the legislation that exists to minimize the pain and the impact on the residential, on residents in the next coming tax year. By virtue of doing so, however, the shift ipso facto, because it is a shift, puts more of the burden on the commercial and industrial portion. And so everything that my colleagues have just said is so very true, that we are indeed a very desirable place to live and raise a family, but we are also a very desirable place to come and establish and run a business. And our healthy commercial base really is illustrative of that, in spite of the fact that they come here and that they stay here knowing that they are bearing a little bit more of the burden, but they do so knowing that they have access to our workforce and the population here and the access to Route 93. So it's really, this shift makes it possible for the residents to enjoy the environment and the community that we live in, but it also it allows us to live in an environment where we have this great commercial base, and where the commercial base is largely on the outskirts. And so it's a really healthy environment we find ourselves. And Judy, you said a moment ago that Reading doesn't do the shift. They really don't have that same amount of balance between residential and commercial. And I think we're very, very fortunate in that regard. So certainly the shift is healthy from a financial perspective, but it also, I think, supports our overall town's growth.
Okay, having had this discussion, would anyone like to make a motion to adopt the recommendation.
So again, just to be clear, I think the board, if it's so inclined, could entertain a motion to approve the minimum residential factor of .779155 for fiscal year 2017, which results in a classification shift of 1.75, 175%.
So move.
Motion been made, do I have a second?
Second.
Anything further? Hearing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do just have a form that needs your signature to be
Sure.
submitted to DR. I can
Okay.
leave that with you.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, moving on to our next appointment, which is with Gina Daniels for 4982 Building Association, Inc., doing business as the Knights of Columbus, regarding the request to change the manager from William B. Liston to Gina M. Daniels and to change the officers and directors. I do see two gentlemen that I recognize in the back. Are you here representing the Knights, Mr. Woods? Can I kindly ask you to come forward to the table? And I certainly know who you are, but if you can just state your full name for the record.
Hello, my name is Bob Woods. I am the president of Wilmington Knights of Columbus Building Association 4982. We had our former manager, Bill Liston, step down and resign, so now we're in the process of changing it over to a new management, Gina and Jimmy DeFeo.
Okay. And Jeff, do you want to take us through the packet of information here? And I believe there was some abutter notifications, et cetera, for this.
Yes, so in, one of the requirements that the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission has is that the local licensees maintain a current information on both the manager and the board of directors. So what the Board of Selectmen is being asked to consider this evening is signing off on the new manager, Gina Daniels, and also the individuals who would serve on the, as the new members of the Board of Directors, Robert Woods Jr., get the other individuals'
H5.
names here.
Original.
Oh, okay, yep. So the individuals would be John Kavanaugh, Frank Mango, John being, serving as the president. I'm sorry, let me start over again here. So we have Dwight Maxwell serving as the president, John Kavanaugh, vice president, Frank Mango, clerk, treasurer, John Hayward as clerk, John Donahue as director, and Donald Olet as director. Those were the prior individuals serving on the board. The selectmen are now being asked to consider the new individuals on the board, which would be Robert Woods Jr. as president, Jared Constantino as vice president, and John Ring Jr. as treasurer. We have a recommendation from the police chief with regard to the manager, Gina M. Daniels. Upon review of the application of Gina Daniels, we recommend approval of the position of manager for the Knights of Columbus. If you need additional further information, feel free to contact me.
Okay. And everything else is in order? You have all your paperwork that you need?
Yes.
Okay.
So just would need
Okay.
a vote.
So questions, comments, or a motion from the board? And once again, we're being asked to approve the request for the change in the manager to Gina M. Daniels, who I see is here. I believe, is Gina here? She's not here, okay. And then the change of the officer and directors as listed by the manager.
Is it two separate votes, two separate approvals, or is it all in one?
It would be one vote.
Okay.
So questions, comments?
I'd make a motion that we approve it as described by the chairperson.
Okay.
Just a quick question through the chair to
Sure.
Bob. Yeah, I noticed that you don't have a clerk listed. Is that because that's just an open position?
Yeah.
Because I figured a clerk would be
Yes.
vital to keep the records in the minutes.
We have a guy that does it, but it's just an open position, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So motion's been made. Do I have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, yes,
If I may.
yes.
Mr. Woods, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your words here. I appreciate Mrs. Daniels stepping up, and I appreciate you and your colleagues stepping up to serve on the board. Not only am I a proud member of the Knights of Columbus, I'm also on the board, on the books as an employee, so I'll be abstaining from this vote.
Okay,
I also want to, I'm not going to abstain. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. The Knights of Columbus is made up of kind of two distinct and separate organizations. There's the fraternal charitable arm of the organization, of which I'm a member, and I know Greg is as well. And then there's the Building Association, which are the folks that really manage the operations of the building, the rentals, the hall rentals, et cetera. And I'm not affiliated in any way other than sort of being a member of the Knights of Columbus. But, so I just want to be fully transparent and disclose that, but it doesn't preclude me from being able to vote on this matter because I'm not involved at all in the Building Association.
okay.
Okay, and in that case, then I should tell you that I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus as
Anybody
well,
else?
and you missed me, Mike, and that's all right. But I can still vote.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second, we had discussion. All those in favor? Okay. So 4, and 1 abstaining. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, our next appointment is with Lee A. I am going to try and, can you say your last name for me? Ganem, okay. Senior, Triple Nickel Auto Body and Repair LLC. This is a public hearing. It's a request to obtain a Class 2 vehicle sales license for the property located at 555 Main Street in Wilmington. Good evening.
How are you? Good evening.
Doing well, thank you.
Hi.
So, basically, if you just want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your operations down at your location. I do see that you're open.
Yeah.
I do see that you have some slips for us. You
Yeah.
can certainly submit these. You can certainly approach us and submit them to the manager, and then we'll walk you through the whole process.
All of them, we're missing one, hasn't got returned yet.
Okay.
Okay,
So we sent them all out, and we got all the receipts, and one came back.
Okay.
Basically, the owner of Triple Nickel Auto Body and Repair, like she just said, 555 Main Street, body shop, auto repair. Redid the place, came out nice, as everybody knows, driving by. Business is good. Trying to do a little small secondhand cars, just to keep things rolling and afloat. Nothing major, car here and there you acquire through the business, stuff like that. And I was talking with a couple people in the town, they said it was a doable thing. So I'm here seeing if we could move forward with that.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, do you want to take us through your recommendations and?
Yes.
And just for the public's benefit, can you just re-explain, and even for members that are newer on the board, even getting a Class 2 vehicle sales license, what that permits this operator to be able to do?
Yes, so in instances where there's a body shop, auto body shop, per the town bylaw, and this is the zoning bylaw, you may recall there was a modification made at the most recent town meeting in April of 2016, and I'll just read it into the record. For used vehicle sales, in the general business and general industrial districts, auto repair and body shops may use the paved portion of the lot for sale and display of up to a total of 2 used vehicles. No used vehicles shall be parked within 20 feet of the sideline of the street. For sale signs covering not greater than 20% of the vehicle windshield are permitted and must be attached to the vehicle. All other signs advertising used vehicle sales are prohibited. The sale of used vehicles is allowed at new vehicle dealerships, provided the vehicles are displayed at the same site as the showroom and related dealership facilities. So The main point being that the restriction is that not more than 2 vehicles used vehicles may be provided for on the lot. So this request is for the board to grant a Class 2 used vehicle license. I do have a recommendation from the police chief. Our review of the application of Lee Ganem, Wilmington, Mass. Was recommended for approval for a Class 2 general garage license. If you need further information, feel free to contact me. I also have a recommendation from the building inspector, Al Spalding. I have reviewed the above-mentioned application and have no outstanding zoning issues. And that is it in terms of recommendations.
Okay. So this is a public hearing, so at this time I will go to the audience. Is anyone here to speak on this topic? Okay, seeing none. Questions, comments, or a motion from board members?
I would just move to approve the request for the Class 2 garage license.
Okay, motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Continued success, dude.
Good luck. Thank you. Okay, our next appointment is with Frank West and Gunnery Sergeant William Gilliam, or Gilliam, I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, I apologize. Toys for Tots program. Good evening.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. First of all, Gunny Sergeant Gillum could not make it tonight. In his place is Petty Officer Charles Curtis, who's the second in command of the Toys for Tots program for both Middlesex and Essex County. Just wanted to spend a couple of brief minutes, and I think, actually, I'll start it off with Petty Officer Curtis. I think he wanted to say a few words, and also I think he has something for the town manager.
Yes, thank you. I'm Petty Officer Curtis, represent Detachment 5 of the Marine Corps Reserves up in Devens. We have a Commander's Award for the town, but for Toys for Tots, it's a program that we're running around Christmas time to give Christmas presents to underprivileged children in the local area. Last year, we provided more than 500,000 toys to local kids in need, and this year we're expecting to do more than that. We just appreciate the town's support in that.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to do that.
Thanks so much.
And just on the local end, first, I'd like to thank the town manager for once again allowing a toy box here at the town hall, and wanted to let you guys all know that there's toy boxes all around town, anywhere from Market Basket on one end all the way down to Reading Bank on the Lowell Street end, and all in between and all around. You know, a lot of the businesses have boxes in their town for their employees. A couple of things that I was passing out is that there's some Toys for Tots pins that, and there's one also from Bev too, and you know, just kind of think, you know, if you happen to think of Toys for Tots or any of the neighborhood charities during the Christmas season, that would be great. Didn't know if you guys had any questions that we could answer about how to get toys or what the program's all about while we're here.
I just want to say thank you very much for coming in and for this award. We certainly appreciate it, and to you, Frank, and your organization for doing this annually. I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart and to that of your families, and through your work and the efforts of those that you have working with you, this happens every year and is very, very successful. So I don't have any specific questions other than to just compliment you on your work, and certainly encourage people to participate in any way that they can. You know, this event is happening. I know the Santa trip that we just recently approved with one of the Wilmington police officers is also collecting toys. So there's certainly a multitude of different activities going around town for the holiday season. So I would certainly just encourage people to participate in any way that they can. So I'll turn it over to any board members. I'll start to my right here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. West. Appreciate this, and also want to encourage residents to participate in such a great cause, and I look forward to hopefully another successful year for you. And also want to thank Petty Officer Curtis for your service. I appreciate you being here also.
I'd like to echo the comments of my colleagues on the council, and Frank, you're doing a yeoman's job with this year after year, and congratulations on this.
Anything to my
Yeah,
left?
thank you, Madam Chair. Just to echo what the Madam Chair said, appreciate everything you've done, Frank, in this town. You absolutely are very on top of this all the time, and once again, I want to appreciate you being in the military and for everything you do for our country. It really means a lot. And there's a lot of good folks up here that appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Yeah, similar sentiments. Petty Officer Curtis, thank you for being here this evening and representing the military and certainly the Marine Corps and for your service to our country. Frank, as always, it's a great pleasure to have you here in this capacity. And, you know, it's, I think we sort of take for granted sometimes that it's the holidays and it's gift giving, but there are those folks that don't have the luxury of being able to take that for granted. And so you bring that to our attention, and more is better, right? If there's 10 organizations that are collecting toys, then that's better. So I hope that folks will be inspired to come out and participate in your events and fill up the boxes. So.
Well, a couple of quick things that I just wanted to say, and thank you for the compliments. You know, like I said, you know, basically what I say every year is that, you know, I appreciate the comments from the board, but what our job is, my family's been doing for the last 20 years now, is that we put empty boxes out. And that's all we do. We put empty boxes out, and by some miracle, they end up filled, and the warehouse gets filled with toys, and, you know, both the, you know, the Marines and certainly, you know, the Navy, you know, distributes thousands and thousands of toys. So you know, but you know, so our involvement, like I say, is to put out empty boxes, but it's the miracle of the community that actually does the yeoman's work, if you will. A couple of quick things I wanted to say was that I just passed out a flyer for an event that we're doing at our office. Basically, we've got a bunch of professional wrestlers coming, and if people want to give either a $5 donation or a new toy, they can get pictures with the wrestlers, and if they bring their cameras, they can, you know, have pictures taken and all that. More importantly, I just wanted to let people know that if there's residents that need toys, which is obviously the purpose for the program, is they can go into the website, it's toysfortots.org, and they can scroll down, and, you know, basically it scrolls down to Middlesex County, et cetera, and it'll show them how, you know, residents that need toys can certainly get them. So other than that, I just wanted to, I'll leave, there's some extra flyers I'll leave in case the press wants to take them there. And I want to say thank you very much once again. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll see you next year.
Great, thank you. Thank you again, Officer Curtis, for your service. Thank you. Okay. So our last appointment is with the Board of Selectmen to discuss the New England Transrail. Just to put it out here, I think in general, our last meeting, we all had some interest in discussing this and pursuing this further. As a board, I also wanted to acknowledge that Selectman Bendel had also contacted me and asked very specifically that this be an agenda item. I do see in our package, which you all have, is a copy of a memo that was provided from the manager, which I do see is you know, listed as one of our memos here, but I just wanted to call your attention to that. And I'm thinking to help facilitate discussion, Jeff, if you may want to read that memo into the record to start the conversation, if that's okay with you.
Certainly. The town is finalizing comprehensive comments to the Surface Transportation Board's STB Office of Environmental Analysis, OEA, that will address the scope of issues to be evaluated in the environmental impact statement. Our intention is to strongly encourage OEA to consider the full range of impacts that NET's proposed development would have on the 51 Eames Street site, the surrounding neighborhoods, and the town. Issues that we believe OEA must consider during the information gathering phase include transportation over existing roadways and overburdened intersections, severely limited access into and out of the site by emergency vehicles, stormwater runoff from 32 acres proposed for paving, vibration impacts to the bedrock that controls the course of the contaminants, noise impacts from constant rail and truck traffic, and risks to further contamination of groundwater from spills or other discharges on and around the property. OEA will consider comments from the town and other interested parties before finalizing the complete universe of environmental issues to be assessed due to NET's proposed project. OEA is expected to continue to require that New England Transrail address environmental impacts and that the means for mitigating those impacts. Once OEA has assessed the project impacts and NET's proposed means to minimize those impacts, it will offer conclusions and comments in a draft environmental impact statement. Interested parties, including the town, will have an opportunity to provide comment, to question and to encourage OEA's and to challenge OEA's conclusions or the information used to reach those conclusions. According to OEA's regulations, the comment period is typically 45 days following the issuance of the draft EIS. After the comment period has closed, OEA will consider the comments, possibly modify the draft EIS, and issue a final EIS. The final EIS will discuss comments received and highlight any changes in the document made as a result of comments received. The final EIS will be issued to the members of the Surface Transportation Board. The Surface Transportation Board must first determine whether there is a legitimate need for expanded commercial rail transportation in our particular region. If the STB concludes that additional rail would be beneficial to the region, it will then consider the EIS. The STB must then determine whether the project impacts rise to the level that make the project detrimental to the area and/or whether the plans to mitigate those impacts are sufficient to permit the proposed use of the site. No timetable has been set by the STB for issuance of the draft EIS, for the comment period on the EIS, or for OEA's decision on the final. The town has a strong case as to why NET's proposed development of the Olin property is ill-conceived. Dan Deutsch, Esquire, from the Town Council's office, relevant department heads and staff, along with the town's transportation and environmental consultants, have prepared a compelling case against this project. We will remain vigilant in defense of the town's interests. And I would just note that as of the end of today, there is a draft document that we're reviewing internally that will be issued to the Office of Environmental Analysis tomorrow to meet their deadline of November 29th, again commenting on the issues to be considered for environmental review.
Thank you. So this obviously was the memo summary, which is listed in our correspondence, but I thought it'd be relevant to have it read now. In addition, in the package as well is a draft letter that we all received that the manager was kind enough to draft, which I think is also comprehensive, which will be read into the record later on in the agenda. But I just wanted to call that as a point of reference as part of this discussion. So I wanted to open it up, and I'd like to turn to Selectman Bendel first, as you had requested this to be on the agenda. So kind of set the stage and the platform for some discussion, and feel free to take it from here, and we'll keep discussing it until you feel that everybody has had an opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you adding this to the agenda. I think that my colleagues would agree with me that we've heard loud and clear from residents, not only at the forum, public forums, but at previous meetings, that residents are certainly are and have been extremely concerned about this, as are we. So I just want to make sure that we continue to do everything we can as a board to support the residents, support particularly the residents that live in that area, but the town as a whole. I mean, I think we're all affected by it. Myself, I live on the opposite end of town, but I'm just as concerned for the people that live over there as I am concerned for my own family about the possibility of this project coming to town. So I appreciate the the manager putting together this letter that we're going to read here about later on in the meeting, and I appreciate that you will be submitting a document tomorrow to meet the deadline, and I'm glad to see that the town is and has continuing to be on top of this, and just want to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can. If there's anything else we can do, I know that the letter is addressed to some of our local legislators. If perhaps maybe we could further that to even our federal delegation. President-elect Trump, for all that matter, I don't care. As long as we can do everything we can and giving the residents a voice that live in that area and all the residents of Wilmington. Because, as I said before, and I know that my colleagues are adamantly opposed to this project, and we want to make sure that those who are proposing it somehow, in some way, get our message loud and clear. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Are you quit? I'll go next after Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'll be brief. Thank you, Greg. I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I think we should continue to have it until there's hopefully a positive resolution, positive for the town, that is. The letter that we will read, or that will be read in a few moments, I hope, will be supported by the rest of the board, is well-written, and I think articulates our position. You know, a letter to I guess, well, let's that aside. A letter is a letter, right? So how do we elevate the letter in the mind share of those that would be ultimately influencers in the decision-making process? How do we rise that letter to the top of the pile of letters that arrive on any one of these folks' desks? And I don't have the answer. This is a rhetorical question. I've chatted with Jeff about this a little bit. You know, to Mr. Bendel's point, we have carbon copied Senator Tarr, Representative Maselli, and Representative Gordon. I think certainly that's prudent, and we ought to be doing that. I would like for these documents to get into the hands of representatives from Senator Markey, Senator Warren, and certainly Congressman Moulton's office. And to that point, specifically on Congressman Moulton, the STB is a federal agency. Or a federal board. And so inasmuch as having a lot of allies at the state level fighting our cause with us, I really feel like we need to have allies at the federal level influencing or placing the appropriate level of attention and influence to the STB on our behalf. And to me, that strikes me as Congressman Moulton's office, probably more specifically than even the two senators. So, Jeff, we had some conversation about Congressman Moulton had invited us to participate in an open forum on several issues, this issue not being one of them, but that the possibility was that we could set up an appointment perhaps for either this board or a representative of this board or a representative of the town to meet with with Congressman Moulton. And I wonder, are we making progress on that regard, or is that still on the radar screen?
I have had an email exchange with the chief of his legislative office, and then subsequent to that, another representative from Congressman Moulton's office. So there's clearly a desire on the congressman's part to understand the issues. You know, at this point, certainly I'll defer to the board, but I think it would be appropriate at some level to have more of a detailed conversation with staff from my office as well as the congressman's office, and to the extent possible with the Senator Warren and Senator Markey's office about the specifics of this project, and really make them aware of the consequences, potential consequences. To the extent the board is interested in having a representative, any one of the either representative from the senator's office or the congressman's office, I can certainly reach out and make that invitation. I think it would further bolster the point about the level of concern. I think one of the keys, quite frankly, at this point is to educate the staff as clearly as possible about the nature of this project. So My plan is to provide a copy of the document that will be sent to the STB tomorrow, provide a copy of that to Congressman Moulton, Senator Warren, and Senator Markey's office as well, and then begin a conversation with them about how to approach this.
That seems completely appropriate. I think to me, it seems like it's a follow-up issue, right? So after the documents have gone out into the respective offices, I'm sure they're getting documents from a host of communities and towns on any myriad of issues. And I want to make sure, to the extent that it's possible, that our document doesn't fall into the pile somewhere in the middle, that we stay sort of relevant and top of mind in as much as we can. So thank you. I think that course of action, it certainly jives with what I hope to achieve. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Mr. Shampoo, you wanted to add the federal level names to the bottom of the carbon copy?
Unless the letter's actually being mailed to those individuals.
Yes, let me just
Okay.
be clear. So the
Okay.
letter is being directed
Okay,
to
that's
our
what I thought.
congressional
Okay.
delegation, CC'd to our state delegation.
Okay, that's what I thought, okay.
I would take it a step further and let's invite them here. Let's invite Moulton and Warren and Markey here instead of their representatives. They're in town once in a while, so let's have them come here to hear our concerns. We'll get the public, I'm sure would be more than happy to see them, and I'm sure that they'll come out. I want to thank Selectman Bendel for bringing this topic forward again. It's very important, and for this Surface Transportation Board to go forward with it, it's in my mind, it's just crazy. There's no other word for it. I just don't understand it. And the letter is great, it's well-written, but, you mentioned President Trump, President-elect Trump, but let's get our congressmen and our senators here. I watched a cable show the other night where Sheriff Katusian was interviewing Congressman Tsongas. She's in town. I'm sure that these guys and ladies are in town too. So if they're able to do interviews on cable TV, they're able to sit over there in those chairs and answer some questions. So I would suggest an invitation directly to them.
If I could piggyback on my colleagues, and they're not willing to come here, then if we could find out when their office hours are in this area, I'd be happy to go to them and meet with them, and then I'd invite residents from that area and across town to join me. I know that I looked on Congressman Moulton's website, there wasn't anything coming up in this area, but perhaps they could make a exception and make a special visit.
This is a real serious issue, which we all know. I had a resident come up to me while I was shopping in town, and she said, I'm ready to move if they bring this in town. And I think she was serious, a longtime resident. We don't want to see that. So we just make sure that we're staying on top of this issue so that this does not come in.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Not only did a town manager say level of concern, but also it's been a level of consistency. Past boards, which I've served, always been opposed to it, and past congressmen, past senators, Senator Ted Kennedy, Senator John Kerry, we did everything we possibly can, and it does. Strength comes in numbers, and I think it's a great idea to consistent. I agree with the two new selectmen, Selectman Bendel, Selectman Carr, invite them right into the table. I remember, hey, I got to give Turney a little credit. He did come here a couple of times. I got to give him some credit. He's no longer the congressman, obviously, but he did come to this town on a couple of occasions. So I don't know about the senators, but that would be nice. So extend the invitation, because the bottom line is we want less contamination on that site, not more. And by bringing in New England Transrail, you're bringing in more contamination and more disrupted in that area. So, I know that this board feels the same way I do, and we all do. We care about our town, and we love to see this thing just go away. And hopefully that would happen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Certainly agree with all the sentiments that have been expressed. I don't want to be viewed as being silent on the topic, but I certainly don't want to elongate the meeting by being redundant. I think, in summary, what I would just describe my feelings is to be very similar to all of yours, and I think that we have to take our swings at everything that we can, and even if these invites go unanswered or unattended to, we at least know that at every point within this process, we've tried to avail ourselves to every opportunity to have our voice heard and our position be heard. I think your description, Selectman Kyra, that this is absolutely crazy is probably the most eloquent term and to come across on it. And, not to sound unladylike, but I think that there are times in these positions that you need to pound the table, and this is one of those times that we should be pounding the table. So just to kind of give a little bit of an analogy. I say that politely, but that's really how I feel. So that being said, those are my comments. I don't know if anyone has anything that they would like to add. Okay. We good on this topic to move forward? We're gonna cover the letter. Right.
We'll stay on it,
It'll
though.
be
just to be clear,
It'll be
the-
interesting to see what their response is, to see if we actually get the congressmen or the senators here. Since we, the people, vote them in or out, it would be nice to see them address us or come here.
May I ask a question, and I ask it to all of you? Do you think that it would be prudent for us to recommend at this time that residents avail themselves of access to our federal delegation and send in messages of their own? And I don't want to, is that a good idea now, or shall we wait for a little while, or I'm not sure what you guys think about that. I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I think it's a good idea, and I think we should make that this letter should be public as well, so that people want to, maybe they can't summarize it, and maybe they could add on to this their personal touch. I mean, there are residents that know a lot more about this than I do, and they're living it, and those who have been fighting against this for a long time, and this goes back many years, long before I was here. And but perhaps this might be a good starting point for them to send to their legislators, and if they're getting it from every direction, it can only help. And certainly, we're open to ideas. I mean, I'm open to ideas from any resident.
That's a great idea, and I think it should be published in the Town Crier and the Apple. I think the Advocate or wherever this letter should be published everywhere. In addition, it should also include the email addresses of those, of the congressmen and the senators, so that people can send them emails immediately.
So to that point, if you guys are okay with it, the members of the board, maybe we could take the board to consider item out of order, which is the board to consider the signing of the letter, and kindly ask the manager to read the letter at this time so people have a point of reference as to what we're talking about.
That'd be great.
Please.
As I indicated, this letter would be directed to the congressional delegation, to Senators Markey and Warren, and to Congressman Moulton, and it would read as follows. On behalf of the 22,375 residents, we, the Board of Selectmen, as their chief elected officials, are appealing to you to take whatever steps are necessary in persuading the Surface Transportation Board to deny New England Transrail's petition for exemption pursuant to 41 USC sections 10502 and 10901 in docket number FD 34797, subdocket 1. Residents of Wilmington have been saddled for many years with the serious misfortune of a major contamination site. For the past 30 years, contamination has been known to exist at the site of Olin Chemical on 51 Eames Street in Wilmington. As time has marched on, the veil of uncertainty is gradually being removed to reveal contamination that is far more severe and extensive than could have ever originally been imagined. While the Commonwealth's Department of Environmental Protection originally took jurisdiction over the site, given the scale of contamination, it became apparent that only the resources and legislative authority of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency could begin to address this environmental disaster. Unfortunately, EPA's designation of the Olin chemical site on the national priorities list as a Superfund site did not occur before the town was required to discontinue use of 5 of the town's 9 water wells, which have historically been the sole supply of potable water to residents and businesses. The town must now rely upon water from the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority to supplement the supply provided by its four remaining wells. Residents closest to the Olin Superfund site have been forced to live with the stigma of having their property associated with the contamination area. Residents on well water on Cook Avenue in Wilmington have their water regularly tested for nearly 200 contaminants that have been detected in groundwater on and off the Superfund site. Bottled water has been provided to these residents by Olin Chemical on a voluntary basis. And yet, New England Transrail has been pursuing redevelopment of this highly contaminated site since 2003 for purposes of developing a transloading facility that would bring to the site a variety of commodities in the form of solids, liquids, and gas. At the time of NET's initial petition, they were seeking to include solid waste within the mix of commodities that would be offloaded onto trucks for shipment to other destinations. Only through the efforts of our congressional delegation at that time and through the strong efforts of former U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey were NET's efforts derailed. Thanks to the successful passage of legislation sponsored by Senator Lautenberg governing the transportation of solid waste, NET withdrew their petition for exemption. NET has continued to have designs on targeting Wilmington for a transloading facility and has once again filed a petition for exemption with the STB. Given the scale and complexity of this contamination site, EPA has not yet finalized the characterization of on-site and off-site impacts to groundwater. Because the characterization has not yet been completed, EPA, in conjunction with Olin's consultants, have not yet been able to present for public review and discussion a set of options for remediating this highly toxic site. Without having a complete understanding of the on-site and off-site contamination, and without knowing the potential options to clean up the contamination, consideration of redevelopment of this Superfund site for rail and heavy truck transit is simply irresponsible. A decision by the STB to authorize the construction, acquisition, and operation of rail lines and facilities at this site poses serious threats to further contamination of the site through spills or failure to properly control runoff. The substantial truck traffic resulting from this development will exacerbate traffic on already overburdened roads and further stress failing intersections. Development of the site before EPA has completed a public process for establishing a remediation plan may limit the options available for remediation. The ability to clean up this highly contaminated site cannot be subordinated to the redevelopment of this site. There is also the issue of environmental justice. The town of Wilmington, and this neighborhood in particular, should not be forced to endure yet another assault on the ability of residents to live in a safe environment without concerns over the health of their children and themselves, and without concern that the value of their largest asset, their homes, will be negatively impacted by further adverse development in South Wilmington. The town continues to marshal all the resources available to it using staff, legal counsel, and an environmental consultant to express legitimate questions and concerns about the lack of specificity of NET's proposal and the short and long-term consequences if NET's proposal is approved. On behalf of our residents, we are calling upon you to work with the town through any and all means possible to ensure that this ill-conceived petition is not allowed to proceed to fruition. We are appealing to you to protect both the current and future generations who call Wilmington home.
I think this was very well written. Thank you for doing that. So if we've concluded discussion and the letter has been read into the record, I'd like to take up the board to consider item of signing the letter to our legislative delegation. So would anyone like to make a motion to that effect?
I move that we send the letter.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, moving on to communications.
Communications, first item under communications is a memo from me to the board with regard to the designation of town manager as chief procurement officer. This will come up under board to consider, but essentially, I'm asking the board to authorize or approve the position of town manager to serve as chief procurement officer. So under the Inspector General's requirements, which is part of Chapter 30B, one of the laws governing public procurement, all municipalities are required to have a position designated as chief procurement officer. As I note in the memo here, there's a specific section within the Chapter 592, the Act establishing the town manager form of government, that establishes the town manager as being responsible for purchase of all supplies and materials and equipment, and so on. So this letter is asking the board to take that vote. Next, under correspondence, is the memorandum essentially highlighting the status with regard to New England Transrail and the next major elements of the process. Next under correspondence, a letter from Jane Lyman from Comcast. She's outlining the changes that are due to take place with regard to channel lineup. On December 1st, NECN HD will move from channel 810 to channel 840. WBTS TV HD will be added to channel 810. WBTS TV Cozy TV will be added to channel 935. Bloomberg HD will move from channel 916 to channel 844. And then on December 30th, WWDP TV will move from channel 10 to channel 81. BTS TV will be added to channel 10. And then effective January 1st, 2017, NBC television network programming will be broadcast on WBTS TV and WBTS TV HD. On January 12th, Impact Network will be replacing the World Network on channel 236 on the digital preferred tier. Next is additional correspondence from Jane Lyman, Senior Manager of Government Affairs, regarding changes in pricing. I won't go into all the details, but there's a series of pricing changes in the various products and services they offer. They also talk about some of the initiatives that they are working on, and a copy of this notice has been issued to Wilmington cable subscribers. And then another piece of correspondence from Ms. Lyman. This is important information regarding set-top boxes. Just a note, beginning January 24th, some customers in our community will be asked to upgrade their set-top boxes so they are compatible with the new enhanced HD service. With this system enhancement, customers will enjoy improved HD picture quality and be able to record and store more shows on their DVR. To see which set-top boxes need to be replaced, go to the channel 1995 on each of the TVs and follow the on-screen instructions. You can order a new box right from the TV and have it shipped to your home. Also, if, thank you. There's any questions, is a contact here. If you go to xfinity.com/trade-up or call 1-800-XFINITY and mention equipment update, individuals are available to answer any questions.
Okay. And then moving on to the board to consider, which would be to appoint Town Manager Jeffrey Hull as the Chief Procurement Officer for the town of Wilmington. It's my understanding that this is current practice, we're just memorializing it officially, is that correct?
That's right. Again, the Inspector General's office, which oversees Chapter 30B, one of the procurement laws, requires that a position within each community be designated to have as the chief procurement officer. So essentially what the board is doing is voting to designate the town manager, position of town manager as the chief procurement officer, and that is the request.
Okay, questions, comments, or a motion for this appointment?
I'd make a motion that we approve the appointment.
Okay, motion's been made, second. Anyone?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Congratulations, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next, under board to consider is a request to execute the bond authorization for the MWRA grant/loan program. You may recall at the annual town meeting, there was a recommendation to once again participate in the grant/loan program. This is the 7th time that the town has participated in the program. This is for, funding is used for work related to our sewer system, essentially evaluating the sewer system. It's important that we address infiltration and inflow. So infiltration, just to be clear, is groundwater that's improperly entering the sewer lines through leaks in joints or cracks in the sewer lines. Inflow is water entering the system through improper connections like sump pumps, cellar drains, or roof drains. To the extent that this is occurring, it further contributes to the costs that the town and specifically the sewer ratepayers incur. So it's to our advantage to make sure the sewer lines and the sewer system is as tight as possible. Specifically, the amount that town meeting authorized and that the board is being asked to sign off on this evening is a grant in the amount of $98,100 and a no-interest loan in the amount of $119,000. That no-interest loan will be paid off over 5 years in increments, beginning, each increment is $23,980.
Okay, questions, comments, or a motion to consider executing the authorization of a bond issuance to the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority?
So moved.
Motion's been made, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
There are a number of documents to sign here, so perhaps rather than passing them all back and
Okay.
forth here, we can do that.
Sure.
after.
The last one is that item still on the agenda, the board to consider on the execution.
It is not.
It is not, okay, so number 9 has been removed.
Will be scheduled at a later date.
Any public comments?
Can I make a joke?
Sure.
Just to Greg's point, if you want to provide, Selectman Bendel's point, if you want to provide the press with your letter, I'd be happy to tweet it to President-elect Trump.
I don't doubt that for one.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to be proper, can you identify yourself for the record, please?
Oh, Robert Hayes, sorry.
Thank you. And your address.
Well, 1535 Main Street in Tewksbury.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to new business. And I'll start, to anyone that has, I'll start to my right. Go ahead. Anything? 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 Okay, I don't have anything as well. Okay, so moving on to important dates, and Jeff, you're going to add in that additional item.
Yes, so under important dates, it was brought to my attention this afternoon, late this afternoon, by Lou Samaglia, the Veterans Agent, that unfortunately we had another member of the Wilmington community passed away due to a drug overdose. Happened to be a sibling of a veteran here that Lou has been working with. Individual's name is Cassandra Maroney. She happened to be out in California at the time, and the family is looking to have just a small candlelight vigil. As I understand it, it'll be relatively brief, starting at 7 o'clock. There are friends and family out in California that will be doing the same thing at 4 o'clock, I guess West Coast time, 7 o'clock here. And they're looking to do that on the town common. So I just wanted to make the board and anyone who perhaps knew Cassandra Maroney aware that she is from Wilmington.
And the date for that?
Is Thursday, this coming Thursday.
Okay, so Thursday, which is December 1st?
Yes.
December 1st at 7 PM at the Town Common. Okay?
Under other dates, Welcome to Wilmington reception will be held at the Memorial Library, 6 PM to 8 PM. Again, this is an opportunity for anyone who is new to Wilmington or perhaps hasn't fully become aware of what Wilmington has to offer, to go to the library. There's a number of different nonprofits. The town will be represented and find out a little bit more about Wilmington. November 30th, brush drop-off Old Main Street, 8 AM to 2 PM. December 1st, Santa's Workshop, Town Hall, 6 PM to 7:30 PM. December 3rd, Breakfast with Santa. December 3rd also is a brush drop-off Old Main Street, 9 AM to 4 PM. December 3rd is the Christmas tree lighting, Town Common. December 3rd and 4th is the Festival of Lights, Villanova Hall. December 4th is the holiday social at the Harnden Tavern, 1 PM to 4 PM. December 15th is the next Facilities Master Plan Committee meeting here at Town Hall, 6 PM. December 12th is the next Board of Selectmen's meeting here in Room 9 at 7 PM.
Okay, great. All right, at this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Motion's been made, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous, good night, thank you.